Okay, so picture this. You're humming that one, like ridiculously catchy song from the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
The one you haven't heard in maybe, what, 20 years. And then you walk into the grocery store and boom, there it is, blasting.
Oh, wow, yeah. What are the chances?
Exactly. It feels like a little nudge, you know,
Mhm.
from somewhere. Or maybe you're wrestling with a really tough problem at work, just totally stuck.
Been there.
Right. And then you pull a random book off your shelf, open it up, and bam! The exact sentence you needed just like jumps off the page.
Weird, huh?
Super weird. And these kinds of moments, these little unexpected winks from reality. Well, that's what we're diving into today.
Exactly. We're tackling Carl Jung's fascinating and, yeah, sometimes pretty mind-bending ideas about synchronicity.
Synchronicity, okay.
But before anyone thinks we've gone all, woo-woo.
Right. Got to keep our feet on the ground.
Well, yeah, because Jung, this giant of psychology, he wasn't really interested in the paranormal in that spooky sense. He was a seriously sharp, analytical mind. And he was grappling with these strange coincidences, the ones that seem to completely defy the normal A leads to B logic we usually rely on.
Right. The cause and effect thing.
Precisely.
So he called them meaningful coincidences, which I guess is pretty straightforward.
It is. He wasn't trying to, conjure spirits or anything.
Seance tables involved.
No.
Mm.
He was trying to understand these moments where your inner world, your thoughts, your feelings, maybe a dream, seems to perfectly mirror something happening out there.
In the real world.
Yeah, in the external world. And it feels significant, meaningful, but there's no obvious cause, no chain reaction linking them.
And I bet suggesting that back then, early 20th century, that probably didn't go over too well.
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Suggesting there might be more to the universe than just, billiard balls hitting each other. It
Uh.
was. Well, let's just say he faced some skepticism, like bringing a kazoo to a symphony orchestra, as you said earlier.
Right. Okay, so our mission for this deep dive then is to really unpack what Jung was getting at with synchronicity.
Yeah, what's the core idea? Could there actually be something beyond cause and effect at play here?
And what role does our own mind, our psyche, play in all this?
And why did he connect it all to the I Ching, that ancient Chinese wisdom text? Lots to unpack.
Okay, let's do it. Where do we start?
Causality.
Yeah, let's start there. Jung took a really hard look at causality, the bedrock of modern science, right?
Uh-huh.
And what he pointed out, and this is pretty key, is that the natural laws we think of as totally fixed, they're actually more like really, really good statistical averages.
Okay, like probabilities rather than certainties.
Exactly. Especially when you get down to the quantum level, things get, well, weird. Reality gets a lot less predictable down there.
Right, the whole quantum fuzziness thing.
And the fascinating thing is, in our everyday world, the big world, the macrophysical world, as Jung called it, we are just wired to see cause and effect.
Our brains love patterns.
They're pattern-seeking machines, trying to even imagine an event without a cause. It feels almost impossible, like trying to, I don't know, lick your elbow. Huh. Yeah, your brain just sort of glitches.
Right. But Jung argued, just because our normal experience is dominated by A causing B, doesn't mean there isn't room for other kinds of connections, acausal ones.
Okay, so how did he actually define synchronicity? Give us the official version.
Okay, brace yourself. That's a bit formal. Jung defined it as the simultaneous occurrence of a certain psychic state with one or more external events which appear as meaningful parallels to the momentary subjective state, and in certain cases, vice versa.
Whoa, okay. Let's break that down.
Yeah.
Simultaneous occurrence.
Things happening around the same time.
Psychic state.
What's going on in your head? Thoughts, feelings, dreams.
External events.
Stuff happening out in the world.
Meaningful parallels.
That's the key bit, right? It feels connected?
Significant?
Yes. And the other crucial part, a causal. No obvious cause and effect link.
So it's not just like finding a penny after thinking about money. It has to feel genuinely meaningful.
That feeling of significance. Yeah, that's really what's that synchronicity apart from just random chance. Jung himself pointed to some pretty startling experiences he had early on.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, he described this time when he was younger, a solid oak table in his house. Just split with a loud crack. No reason.
Split. Wow.
And shortly after that, a strong steel bread knife he had just shattered, broke into pieces. Again, no apparent reason, no stress on it.
Okay, that's definitely weird. I can see why that would get you thinking.
Understandably.
Yeah.
His mother was apparently quite spooked. But for Jung, it was a trigger. These strange, seemingly linked events that just defied simple explanation.
And wasn't there a famous story involving fish? Lots of fish.
Yes, the wonderfully weird fish story. And get this, it happened on April Fool's Day.
Seriously, that almost makes it less believable.
More. So the story goes, they were having fish for lunch. Someone made an April fish joke. The paper fish prank. Then one of his patients mentions a dream she'd had about a big fish. Later that same day, another patient shows him some drawings that heavily feature fish.
Okay, fish are starting to pile up here.
It doesn't stop. And someone else just casually mentions an old saying about Christ being fed with fish. It was like, Fish Day.
Like the universe decided on a theme, a very specific aquatic theme.
Pretty much. Now, Jung, being Jung, he initially thought, okay, maybe it's chance. Fish on Friday, April Fool's Day. Maybe he was just primed to notice fish because of his interest in symbols.
That makes sense. You look for something, you find it.
But the story had a kicker. Years later, he's actually writing about this very series of fish coincidences. He's by a lake.
Uh-oh, I sense where this is going.
He finishes writing a sentence about it, walks over to the seawall, and right there, lying on the ground...
No, don't say it.
A dead fish.
Get out. The seventh fish.
The seventh fish in the sequence. At that point, even the most rational person might have to concede that something odd is going on.
Okay, the universe definitely has a weird sense of humor. Or maybe it's just trying really hard to make a point.
Maybe. And Jung wasn't actually the first person to ponder these kinds of connections. He was influenced by the philosopher Schopenhauer.
Schopenhauer, right. What was his take?
Well, Schopenhauer talked about two kinds of connections in life. You've got your standard causal chain dominoes falling. A leads to B leads to C.
The usual.
And then he talked about something he called a meaningful relationship of simultaneity.
Catchy phrase.
Yeah. But think of it like longitude and latitude lines on a map. They cross at points, defining a location, but one doesn't cause the other. They just coexist meaningfully at that point.
Okay, so things happening at the same time, linked by meaning, not cause.
That was Schopenhauer's idea. He thought it stemmed from some kind of underlying cosmic will, a sort of pre-established harmony.
Like everything's secretly orchestrated.
Kind of. Now, Jung agreed that, yes, these two types of connections probably exist, causal and meaningful simultaneity. But he wasn't so sure about the pre-established harmony part. Well, Jung, knowing more about modern physics and statistics, saw that natural laws weren't absolute ironclad rules, but statistical truths. That leaves a bit more wiggle room, let's say.
So maybe these weird coincidences don't need a grand cosmic plan. They can just pop up in the statistical gaps.
Something like that. It allows for these meaningful correlations without requiring a fully deterministic universe.
It's actually kind of comforting to know people have been puzzling over this stuff for ages. Did Jung mention others?
Oh yeah, he looked back at historical accounts. He mentioned early researchers, names like Gurney, Myers, Podmore, who were actually trying to collect data on things like telepathic experiences.
Wow, collecting data on telepathy back then, that must have been tough.
Imagine. And the astronomer Camille Flammarion even tried to calculate the odds of things like phantasms of the living, seeing an image or feeling the presence of someone far away right when they died.
Whoa, talk about a long-distance call indeed.
Flammarion apparently had his own weird moments too. He said once, while he was writing about the power of the wind.
Let me guess. A big gust of wind.
Blew all his papers out the window.
Yes.
Like a universe providing an instant illustration.
Okay, that's just funny.
And he told this amazing story about a mesure de Forgibu and a specific plum pudding that kept showing up in different unexpected places. A triple coincidence.
A plum pudding stalker.
Apparently. And another guy, Wilhelm von Schultz, collected stories about lost objects reappearing in the strangest ways. The where on earth did that come from moments.
Happens all the time with my keys. Maybe it's synchronicity.
Maybe. But it shows this isn't a new phenomenon.
Okay, so people notice this stuff. But what about trying to study it more scientifically? You mentioned Ryan earlier.
Right, J.B. Ryan at Duke University. His experiments with Zener cards are probably the most famous attempt to study extrasensory perception, ESP.
Zener cards. Those are the ones with the simple shapes, right? Star, square.
Circle, cross, and wavy lines. Yep, 5 symbols. The setup was simple. Someone looks at a card, another person tries to guess the symbol without seeing it.
Okay, so purely by chance, you'd get it right 1 out of 5 times, 20%.
Exactly. That's the baseline probability. But Ryan's experiments, over thousands and thousands of trials, consistently showed results above that 20% chance baseline.
Significantly above.
Statistically significantly above. Some people were just much better guessers than chance would predict. And there was one absolutely staggering instance.
Go on.
One subject guessed all 25 cards in a deck correctly.
All 25? No way!
Yes, the odds against that happening by chance are, well, they're astronomical. Billions, trillions to one. It's practically impossible by chance alone.
Wow. Okay, that's hard to just dismiss.
And what was really intriguing was that when they increased the physical distance between the guesser and the cards, even hundreds of miles, it didn't seem to affect the results much.
Distance didn't matter. That's weird.
Very weird. It suggested that whatever was happening wasn't constrained by space in the way we normally think. And they even did experiments manipulating time, which seemed to hint at precognition knowing the card before it was looked at.
Okay, my brain is officially starting to bend. Precognition. Knowing the future.
Well, the results suggested it, yeah. And this is where Jung really got interested. He saw Ryan's work as pointing towards a kind of psychically conditioned relativity of space and time.
A what now?
Basically, the idea that our minds, or maybe the unconscious, might experience space and time differently than our conscious selves do. Maybe they're not fixed, rigid frameworks out there.
But more like flexible, elastic, influenced by our psyche.
Exactly. Maybe space and time are, in a way, postulated by consciousness, as Jung put it, and are much more fluid in the unconscious realm.
Mind blown. Okay, so how does this tie into Jung's bigger ideas? You mentioned archetypes.
Yes, this is crucial.
Yeah.
Archetypes and the collective unconscious. Jung proposed that beneath our personal individual consciousness, there's this deeper layer we all share.
The collective unconscious.
Right. And it's populated by these archetypes, fundamental patterns, images, instincts. Think of them like universal blueprints for human experience. The mother, the hero, the shadow.
Okay, I've heard of those.
They carry a kind of energy, a numinous quality, Jung called it. They're like the greatest hits of human psychic experience, inherited somehow.
So how do these archetypes link up with, say, a fish falling out of the sky?
Well, Jung's idea was that synchronistic events often happen when an archetype gets activated or constellated within us.
Constellated, like stars aligning.
Sort of. It's like an inner pattern gets stirred up, charged with energy, and this inner state then somehow corresponds, resonates with an event in the outer world.
Okay.
So the connection isn't causal, like one thing directly making the other happen. It's more like resonance, like two tuning forks vibrating in sympathy, even if they're not touching. The archetype provides the underlying pattern, the meaning that links the inner and outer events.
So the feeling of meaning comes from the activated archetype.
That's the idea. The coincidence feels meaningful because it taps into one of these deep universal patterns.
Can you give us a concrete example? Jung must have had cases.
Oh, the classic one is the story of his patient and the scarab beetle. It perfectly illustrates this.
The scarab beetle. Okay, tell us.
So he had this patient, a woman who was very highly educated, very rational, maybe too rational. She was kind of stuck in her therapy because she thought she knew it all already.
Ah, the intellectual defense.
Exactly. Very resistant. One day, she's telling Jung about an important dream she'd had the night before. In the dream, someone gave her a golden scarab beetle.
Okay, a scarab, Egyptian symbol, rebirth, that sort of thing.
Right. So she's describing this dream, and just she says the words golden scarab, Jung hears a gentle tapping sound behind him at the window.
Uh-oh.
He turns around, opens the window, and catches an insect as it flies in.
Let me guess.
It was the Setonia aurata, a common rose chafer beetle, which happens to be
gold green, like a scarab.
the closest thing to a golden scarab you're likely to find flying around Switzerland. Jung handed the beetle to her and said, "Here is your scarab."
Wow. Talk about perfect timing. What happened?
Yeah. Well, as you can imagine, this completely broke through her rational defenses. This impossible, irrational event cracked her intellectual shell open and allowed the therapy to actually move forward.
That's incredible. It's like the universe just delivered the symbol right to her.
Jung saw it as a perfect paradigm of synchronicity. The inner event, the dream symbol, and the outer event, the beetle appearing, coincided meaningfully, causally, and it had a profound transformative effect precisely because it bypassed her logic.
Okay, that makes the concept much clearer. And you mentioned the I Ching earlier. How does that fit in?
Jung was deeply fascinated by the I Ching, the ancient Chinese book of changes. He saw it as a system that didn't rely on Western-style causality at all.
How so? Isn't it used for divination, asking questions?
It is, but Jung believed it operated on a synchronistic principle. Unlike Western science, which tries to isolate variables and find direct causes, the I Ching aims to grasp the entirety of a situation at a particular moment.
A more holistic view.
Exactly. It relies more on intuition, sensation, what Jung called the irrational functions, to understand the quality of the moment. Think about how you consult it. You toss coins or manipulate yarrow stalks.
Right. Seems pretty random.
Precisely. There's no causal link between how the coins fall and the answer you get. Jung argued the meaning arises from the synchronistic parallel between your inner state, the question you hold, your psychological situation, and the seemingly random pattern generated by the coins or stalks at that specific moment.
So the meaning is in the timing, in the coincidence of the question, and the random pattern.
Yes, the moment itself is seen as containing the answer, and the I Ching provides a symbolic language to interpret it.
Fascinating. Did Jung try to test these ideas further? Maybe astrology.
He did, actually. He's cautious about it, but he conducted an astrological experiment with a collaborator, Liliane Frey-Ron. They looked at marriage horoscopes.
Marriage horoscopes. Okay, this sounds interesting.
They selected 50 specific astrological configurations, or aspects, things like the sun being conjunct the moon, or Mars opposing Venus, ascendant conjunct descendant, traditional indicators.
Yeah, the stuff astrologers look at for relationships.
Right. And they looked for these aspects in the birth charts of 180 married couples, comparing the frequency to control groups of unmarried pairs.
And what did they find? Did anything stand out?
Well, initially they found that one specific aspect, the sun-moon conjunction, traditionally very significant for marriage and astrology, occurred in the married group with a frequency of 10%.
Okay, is 10% high.
The statistical probability of that happening purely by chance was calculated to be extremely low, something like 1 in 10,000.
Whoa. Okay, that's significant.
And when they analyzed 2 further batches of horoscopes, different aspects popped up as statistically significant maximum moon conjunction, moon ascendant conjunction, also with very low probabilities of occurring by chance.
And were those also traditionally linked to marriage?
Yes, especially involving the moon. So the striking thing was that all 3 statistically significant hits they found involved moon conjunctions, aligning with astrological tradition about marriage compatibility.
So, did Jung conclude astrology works?
Not exactly. He was very careful. He noted there were statistical fluctuations, and the results tended to blur a bit with larger numbers. He wasn't claiming causal proof,
Right.
but he found it deeply intriguing synchronistic, perhaps that the very aspects highlighted by centuries of astrological tradition happen to be the ones showing up as statistically unlikely maxima in their data. It was another one of those meaningful coincidences.
Even the experiment itself had a synchronistic feel.
And funnily enough, they later discovered some unconscious bias had crept into their initial statistical calculations, which they had to correct. So even the process of investigation had its own layer of unexpectedness.
Always keeping you on your toes. Jung also talked about numbers, didn't he? As more than just number.
Yes, he pondered if numbers might be more than just concepts for counting. Could they have an archetypal foundation?
Numbers as archetypes. Like the number 3 is inherently meaningful.
Potentially. He suggested number might be an archetype of order which has become conscious. Think about the almost mystical auras surrounding certain numbers across history and cultures. 3, 4, 7, 12.
Right, they pop up everywhere, in myths, religions.
Exactly. And he noted the mathematical structure often found in mandalas, those circular diagrams that often emerge spontaneously from the unconscious, especially during times of integration or stress.
Mandalas often have fourfold symmetry, right? Quaternities.
Very often, yes. It's as if the psyche uses the structure of number, particularly 4, as a fundamental ordering principle to create wholeness or balance.
So numbers themselves might be part of this underlying meaningful order.
That was his speculation, which leads to another really big question, the mind-body problem.
The classic philosophical headache. How does the mental relate to the physical?
Jung suggested synchronicity might offer a fresh perspective. If there are these meaningful acausal connections linking psychic states and physical events, maybe it points to a kind of causeless order underlying both.
Bridging the gap, maybe.
Possibly. He also talked about something called absolute knowledge that seems inherent in some synchronistic phenomena.
Absolute knowledge? What's that?
It's like a direct, non-sensory awareness of things, like knowing about an event happening far away, or even in the future, without any normal way of knowing. Think back to Ryan's precognition results.
Okay.
Jung mentioned reports from people in deep comas or near-death experiences who described observing events accurately, sometimes even from outside their body.
Out-of-body experiences, yeah.
Suggesting perhaps that psychic activity or awareness isn't entirely dependent on normal brain function. He cited a case documented by Sir Auckland Geddes involving verifiable ESP during a physical collapse, and even Carl von Frisch's work on bees.
Bees? How do bees fit in?
Von Frisch observed complex communication and coordination in beehives that seemed to imply a kind of collective intelligence or awareness beyond simple individual responses. Another hint, perhaps, of knowledge operating outside typical channels.
Wow. So bringing it all together, what was Jung's final conclusion about synchronicity? Where does it fit in the grand scheme?
He basically proposed that we should consider synchronicity as a fourth fundamental principle, alongside space, time, and causality.
A fourth principle for understanding reality.
Yes, a principle that helps explain the interconnectedness of things, especially the weird interplay between the psychic realm, our minds, and the physical world. It's not about denying causality.
It's just saying it's not the only game in town.
Exactly. It's recognizing another dimension, another connecting principle, one based on meaning.
Is there a particular quote from Jung that really sums this up?
Oh, there are many good ones. How about this? Synchronicity postulates a meaning which is a priori in relation to human consciousness and apparently exists outside man.
Wow. Meaning exists outside man. That's a big thought. It suggests meaning isn't just something we invent or project onto a meaningless universe.
Precisely. It hints that meaning might be woven into the fabric of reality itself, waiting to be perceived or encountered.
Or another one you mentioned earlier. Synchronicity designates the parallelism of time and meaning between psychic and psychophysical events.
Which scientific knowledge so far has been unable to reduce to a common principle.
Yeah, it highlights that gap in our standard scientific understanding.
So, okay, if we're wrapping this up, the next time one of those weird little coincidences happens, you think of someone and they immediately call, you find that lost object in the last place you'd look.
Or the fish shows up on the seawall.
Right. Jung is basically saying, hey, don't just shrug it off as random noise. Take a second. Consider it.
Yes, see it as potentially significant, as a hint, maybe, of this deeper connecting principle that operates on meaning, not just cause and effect.
It's not about demanding a mystical explanation for every little thing, is it? Not at all. Science rightly focuses on causality, on statistical averages, on repeatable patterns. That's essential. But synchronicity invites us to look at the exceptions, the unique moments, the subjectively meaningful occurrences.
And just cultivate a sense of wonder, maybe, an open mind about the mysteries that are still out there.
Exactly that. Keep that sense of curiosity alive about the universe in our own minds.
So if people want to explore this more after our deep dive,
definitely read Jung's Synchronicity itself. It's dense, but fascinating. Or maybe explore the I Ching, see how that feels. Even looking into modern parapsychology research could be interesting.
consider it an invitation to keep exploring.
Absolutely. And maybe the best takeaway is just that final question Jung sort of leaves us with.
What meaningful coincidences have you experienced?
Yeah. And what, if anything, might they be telling you? It's a personal reflection, really. An invitation to notice those, moments in your own life and just wonder. Perhaps they hold more significance than we usually imagine.